Hello again, everybody, and welcome to take 2 of this review. I just spent an hour doing this entire review, and then when I played it back, apparently my microphone was loose or something, not plugged in correctly. I don't know how that happened, but it was really, really staticky, and you couldn't make out anything I was saying. I'm hoping I've now fixed the problem, because when I messed with it and recorded the last 10 minutes or so, it was fine. But, I already talked for a whole hour about this episode, but it was so staticky you couldn't hear any of it, and my throat is really, really, really bothering me, so I may very well lose my voice by the time I get to the end of this again. Plus, I've already, spent an hour, and I'm probably going to get interrupted, within the next 2 minutes, because I don't usually generally have any more than an hour, if that, for quiet time. So, I may have to do this narration in 3 parts, or 4 if you count the first one. But anyway, so we're gonna try this again, and I don't know, I just did this whole thing, so I don't know, I might forget things, I might leave things out, because I already did the whole thing once. Anyway, and like I said, my throat is really killing me too, but we're gonna try. Once again. This is the first episode of Season 3, it's called Valar Dohaeris, which I didn't say the first time I recorded it, because I was talking about how I'm probably going to get interrupted, and my throat is really, 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 really killing me, and I'm not really in Season 3 mindset, because tomorrow night we've got the 3rd episode of Season 5 on, and I'm just kind of in Season 5 mode, so I'm going back and reviewing Season 3 after watching the whole entire 4 seasons a couple weekends ago, so I might be a little scattered, especially since I already did this, and I improvise most of these. I have notes, but I improvise most of them, so we'll see if I can get through it again or not. But like I said, I might leave out a bunch of stuff because I already did this once. Alright, anyway, it looks like this one is picking up right after Season 2 ends. And if you recall, Season 2 ended with Sam being chased down by an army of White Walkers and Whites. Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, I just went back and checked the beginning of it before I got too far into it, and it does seem to be recording properly this time. Plus, I thought I heard a car, so I checked to see if I was getting interrupted. But anyway, it seems to be recording this time, so we'll hope. Where we left off Season 2, Sam was getting chased by the big huge army of White Walkers and Whites. That's why I say I think that it looks like this has taken place just a couple minutes after the end of Season 2, which adds to the problem of it being really hard to tell time in this show, because it seems like this is just a couple minutes after the end of Season 2, and then the Davos scene seems like it's been a few days, and then the Dany scene seems like it's been a few weeks, if not months. So time is a really sketchy thing in the show, mainly because they changed the order of a lot of things in the show as opposed to what order they were in the book, so it's really hard to tell when what is happening. But anyway, as you can see, Sam was trying to make his way through the snow, and he saw what he thought was one of his brothers, and then when he walks around in front of the person, he finds out that it's just some dude laying there with his head chopped off. So the Whites and White Walkers have already gotten to this guy, so Sam's not out of the woods yet, and the White Walkers are still on his tail, and they've gotten to that guy. And then he sees a white coming at him out of the snow, so obviously, yeah, he's still in danger zone here. And he starts running from the white, and then of course, this happens a couple times in this show. At the last minute, Sam gets saved. It did work out a little bit differently in the book. It was a big, huge fight, and everybody goes around, and it wasn't just Sam off by himself or something, but Sam gets saved at the last minute by Ghost. Lovely Ghost, who attacks the white, although we see that it takes more than a bit of mauling or swording or daggering to kill these things, because we saw what happened in the previous season when Jon got attacked by the white and he stabbed him several times. So Ghost basically just slowed him down, didn't really do much else. But then at the last minute, Mormont shows up and sets the white on fire, and as we've seen from that other season, Mormont knows that fire is the only way to kill them, because he was there when Jon killed the other one, also with fire. So, he's been saved. Sam has been saved by Mormont, who happens to know the fire thing kills them. Although, again, there's a difference between whites and White Walkers. Fire kills whites, not White Walkers. But anyway, so, still. And Mormont asks Sam if he sent the ravens, because Sam was supposed to send out ravens and ask them for more reinforcements, because they had done that before, but of course, the only one we saw receiving the raven was King's Landing, and Tyrion doesn't believe in supernatural stuff, but he also didn't think that Jeor or Mormont would be lying, but Cersei completely blew it off, and he's like, whatever, I'm not going to send anybody to help them. So obviously they're still trying to get help from the other people in Westeros, and Sam was supposed to send the ravens asking for help, but Sam didn't get a chance to do that before him and Gren and Ed were attacked, and Gren and Ed took off, and Sam fell behind because he's slower than them, and before he could send, ravens off, the Whites and White Walkers were upon him. So, he didn't get a chance to send the ravens, and Mormont said, that was your only job. So, Mormont's a little displeased with him, but now he has to, switch gears here. He's like, okay, fine, we have to get back to the wall as soon as we can, even though we're probably all going to get killed trying to get there because of what's out here, but we have to get back to the wall as soon as we can and send ravens, because we need help. We can't do this alone. Half of us are already dead, and we're still out here alone with these things. And I like that shot where you get to see White Ghost against all the Black brothers, so that's kind of a cool shot as well. So anyway, that was that scene. Okay, so we get to our next scene, also in the north, also seeming to pick up not too terribly long after the last season, and this is Ygritte and Jon and the rest of them arriving at the wildling camp, and you get a little bit of an idea of how many wildlings there are, and this is our first sighting of a giant. They've been mentioned, but this is the first time we've seen one, and even though the Northerners are more inclined to believe in this kind of thing, you still get the idea that Jon is a little bit awestruck by this, because it is the first time he's ever seen one, even though he's lived in the North all his life. So, we get our first view of the giant, and as they're going into the camp, we've got all the other wildlings yelling stuff at Jon, and calling him Crow, and other things that aren't too nice, and throwing stones at him. And Ygritte says that he's wearing the wrong color, and also this is when Jon makes his first mention of the fact that Mance used to be a ranger as well, but Ygritte just kind of doesn't make much of a response to that, I don't think. And she says, "Oh, don't look so..." Okay, phone ringing. Oh, I swear this recording's cursed. I swear this is like the 17th time I've tried to record this today. But I should give up. Alright, anyway, so she's telling Jon not to look so worried, and she says that if Mance likes him, he'll live another day. And if he doesn't, ... and she doesn't really finish that comment. But basically she just is telling him, this is going to be a test. If you can get Mance to like you, then you can save your own life here. And he also has a little part in here where he's questioning if he's a prisoner still or not. He said, well, if you free me, am I free to go? And she says, yeah, and I'll be free to kill you. So, yeah, it's not a very warm welcome he's getting yet, because they're waiting to see what Mance thinks before they decide what to do with Jon, because even though they don't really follow a hierarchy like the people in Westeros south of the Wall do, they all respect Mance and are following him because he's going to try to keep them safe, so to speak. So they're going to value his opinion, even if it's not like a question of, oh, he's our king. It's a question of they respect his opinion because he's the one that brought them all together and is going to try to put the plan together that's going to keep them from all dying. But anyway, they get to Mance's tent, and the first person we see is Tormund eating the chicken or whatever, and Tormund greets them with, "What do we want with the baby crow?" And Ygritte says, "Well, this baby killed Corin Halfhand." And Tormund gets up and he appears to be a bit skeptical, because Jon's not very big. It wasn't really a thing in the book. I think Jon was just average size in the book. But Kit Harington, who plays Jon, is like 5'8", 5'9", so he isn't very big. So they're kind of playing on that a little bit as well. But he says that, he's killed men twice Jon's size. And Jon's like, well, still, doesn't matter. Big men fall just as easily as small men, or something along those lines. But Jon mistakes Tormund for the king beyond the wall, because that's the first person he sees, and Tormund is like a big and imposing guy. So he assumes, and Tormund is the king beyond the wall. He assumes that Tormund is Mance. And then he kneels, because that's what people south of the wall do when they see a king. They kneel. And and then they all start laughing at Jon for kneeling to Tormund. Not just because it's Tormund and not Mance, but because they point out here that they don't kneel for anyone. The wildlings do not kneel for anyone. And that actually becomes a very important point later on. I mean, it is mentioned a few times, but it becomes really important later on as well. They don't kneel for anyone. And so, even though they're considered primitives and uncivilized, they actually are more advanced in some ways, because they don't follow this whole nobility system where just because you've got the right last name, everybody else has to treat you like you're better. They don't follow that system. They think, everybody's equal. And, if you're strong, you prove you're strong. You don't just get treated like royalty because of who your parents were. So, yeah, they're supposedly, like I said, the primitive and the uncivilized, but they are much more advanced in their rejection of a hierarchy and a monarchy and systems like that, because they're more about equality, which is much more in line with modern ideals, even though, they're still the rich and the poor and everything in real life, but it's not a question of you can be punished for not treating somebody who's richer than you like they're better than you. I mean, it might happen, but not by law. You can treat anybody you want any way you want. I mean, there might be some other consequences because of it, but it's not like you're required by law to worship and kneel to people just because they happen to be richer or from a more prominent family. So it's a more modern take on equality than the people in Westeros have. So in some ways they are more advanced. I mean, in some ways they are more behind. They don't have the same kind of technology or education, but they are more advanced in some of their ways of thinking as well. So, anyway, then Mance finally comes out and corrects Jon, saying, "No, this is Tormund Giantsbane." So, and then he, points out to him that they don't kneel to anybody, and he says that Corin was once his brother, but now he's his enemy, so he's glad he's dead. So again, a reminder that Mance Rayder used to be a member of the Night's Watch, and he actually was born a wildling, and then he was raised by the Night's Watch. So he is a wildling who grew up in the Night's Watch and then went back to being a wildling. That's Mance's kind of backstory, the shortened version of it. But then he goes on to ask Jon, why is he really there? And since Jon's been hearing all of this crap about they're the free folk and everything, he goes with that and says, "Oh, I want to be free." And Mance isn't fooled that easily. He's like, "No, if you wanted to be free, you didn't have to kill Corin or anything. You didn't have to come be with us. You could have just deserted." And he said, "No, I think what you really want is to be a hero." And then Jon changes the story a little bit and mentions that Craster was sacrificing his babies to the wildlings, and that the Lord Commander knew, and he didn't care. Well, I mean, he didn't try to stop him, in other words. And he puts it across like that's the reason he left, because he didn't approve of the Night's Watch approving of what Craster was doing. And no, he didn't approve of it, but that's not the real reason he's there. But he uses that as the reason. He says he wants to fight for the side that fights for the living. And that's why he's there. And so then Mance shakes his hand, and he's in then. So anyway, and then we get to Bronn's vacation day. Tyrion's busy locked in the basement somewhere. So Bronn's off having a party. As I said in the review, I think the Blackwater one, is Bronn's kind of a partier. He's a good times guy. He's a really good fighter and everything, but when he's not fighting, he's with the wine and the women. He's into that a lot more than the Hound anyway, because remember they had that little scenario, that little confrontation before Blackwater. But anyway, and then Pod interrupts his time with the prostitute here, and Bronn's like, I swear I will murder you, boy. So Bronn's not impressed with Podrick's interruption, and we used to get Podrick referring to him as Sir. And that's a recent change. So, again, time is kind of iffy. You can't really tell how much time has passed, but now Bronn is a knight. And Podrick tells him that Tyrion needs him right away, and it's urgent. And then we go to Tyrion. He's, like, looking at his injured face, which was much worse in the book. And there's actually a nod to that in the show as well. And then Cersei shows up and says, it's your sister, the queen. Like, he didn't know she was the queen. Come on. Like, she had to add that. And then she comes in to visit, and he looks out, and he's like, why are the guards there? And she's like, I guess they're protecting me. Playing innocent, like she doesn't know what's going on. Like, oh, I guess they're just here to protect me. What do you mean, why are they here? And she says, if I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't let a wooden door stop me. And obviously, he's under the impression she did want to kill him, because from everything we've been told, Cersei was behind Mandon Moore trying to kill Tyrion. So anyway, he asks her why she's there, and she said that she starts out saying she wanted to see Tyrion's face and that she heard that his nose had been cut off. And that is a nod to the book, because in the books, his nose was actually cut off. But they didn't want him wearing a prosthetic for the rest of the entire series, so they just changed it to a scar across his face. But that's a little nod, a little Easter egg for the book people, that Cersei heard that his nose was cut off. And she goes on about how the rebels lost thanks to Father, basically stressing the fact that she's not giving Tyrion any credit either for his part in the battle. And Tyrion says, well, it's odd, it wasn't a rebel that tried to kill me, it was a member of the Kingsguard. She's like, oh, that's curious. She's sitting there and still playing innocent. And she makes a dig at his new chambers and says, they're a bit of a step down from the Tower of the Hand. So, she's rubbing it in, as she does. And says, oh, well, I guess you don't need much room. Makes the same stupid joke that Pycelle made. And Tyrion's like, you know what, I'm sick of this game. I'm sick of your playing like you don't know anything about anything. Just tell me why you're here. And she just flat out says, what do you want from Father? Because she heard that he was going to see Father. And he's like, well, how'd you know I was going to see him? And she's like, oh, I got 100 spies in my employ. And then she just smiles and says, I heard from Dad. So she's still playing him. And she's saying that she wants to know what he plans on telling Tywin. And he's like, what do you care what I have to tell Tywin? And she says that he slandered her before. And she goes into this story about when she was like a little kid, like 9 or something, and she had the guards beat a servant girl so bad that she lost her eye, and the reason was because the servant girl stole her necklace, and she got in trouble for that, and it was because Tyrion told their father that she had been behind that, and so she uses that as her, see, you lied to Dad before. And he's like, I wasn't lying, you did do that. And she's like, yeah, but the girl never stole a necklace again. So it's just, these two. And they're just, I love scenes with Cersei and Tyrion. They're so fun together. They play off each other so well. And it's probably because they actually are really good friends in real life. And when Peter first got the job on Game of Thrones, I believe he stayed with Lena for a while. So they actually are really good friends. in real life, and that's probably why they play so well off of each other, and I love watching them together. They're so good together. Even though they hate each other, they just play off each other so well. But anyway, and she says that, she doesn't want him to tell lies to father, and he's like, oh, what lies is that? And he's got the little comment about, well, she says, oh, you're not half as clever as you think you are, and he says, I'm still more clever than you. That's another fun line. And then Bronn finally arrives, and he makes fun of the guards, calling them Terran Mant and who's it if who cares. And Meryn Trant corrects him, and Bronn does this little bow and says he served Bronn in the Blackwater, and Meryn's like, you're no knight, and he's like, yes, actually the king did knight me after the Battle of Blackwater, so that is a new development. And Meryn says, oh, you're just some up-jumped cutthroat. Bronn calls him a grub in fancy armor who's better at beating up little girls than fighting real men. Oh, more fun with Bronn. And they won't let him into the room, and a fight's about to ensue between him and the guards here, the King's Guard. And then, of course, Cersei just comes out, doesn't even, look at Bronn, he's not even there. And that abruptly ends the fight, because the guards go off to follow Cersei, because that's their job, to guard Cersei. So, it was a fun little scene between Bronn and the guards, and somehow Cersei managed to save that from becoming a fight, even though Cersei's usually the one instigating most violence. But anyway, so Cersei leaves, and Bronn comes in, and Tyrion doesn't look very impressed that Bronn took so long to get there, because, if Cersei wanted to kill him, she would have had plenty of time by the time he got there. Excuse me. Like I said, my throat is killing me, but we're trying. Anyway, then they go on their little walk outside, and Bronn wants to know why Tyrion sent him, and Tyrion's like, people are trying to kill me. My sister is trying to kill me. The King's Guard is trying to kill me. You need to be with me. You're here to protect me. And Bronn says that he has grown poor protecting him, because Tyrion's like, what, have you grown bored protecting me? And he says, no, I've grown poor protecting you, because Tyrion's been locked up, and Bronn's gone through most of his money. And so Bronn says, I'm a knight now, I'm worth double, you used to pay me double what you used to pay. And Tyrion said, I thought we were friends. He said, yes, but I'm also a sellsword. I sell my sword, I don't lend it out to friends. So that's another fun little Bronn and Tyrion scene. So anyway, just a little Bronn wants pay raise. So anyway, then we get to sunburnt Davos, and this is another thing that makes it hard to tell how much time has passed, because he's obviously not been there long enough to starve to death or die of exposure, but he is getting pretty bad. So it's and this is where he ended up after Blackwater. So it's long enough after Blackwater that he's got the sunburns, and he's not doing too well, but not so long that he died. So it's really hard to tell time-wise. You can just try to guess at it, I guess. And so he sees a boat approaching finally, and you get the impression that it's the first boat he's seen since he ended up on that rock there, and he starts waving at it and takes off his shirt and waves the shirt so it's easier for them to see him, and eventually the boat pulls over to him, and they ask him, okay, who are you? And he says that he was in the Battle of Blackwater, and he was a captain and a knight. And then they ask him, oh, really? He's fighting for which king? And again, Davos is honest, even though it could get him in trouble. He says, oh, the one true king, Stannis Baratheon. Sorry, I always choke when I hear that statement. But anyway, but apparently it was the right answer, because these guys smile, and they end up taking him to Salador San's ship. That's that pirate guy who agreed to help just because he wanted gold, money, and a chance to sleep with Cersei. That guy, Salador San. So they take him to his boat, and Salador tells him that everyone thought he was dead, and he asks him about his son, and Davos says yes, that his son Mathos is dead too. And Salador's like, well, maybe he washed up like you did. And he's like, no, I saw him get burned up by the wildfire. So a little reminder that Mathos is dead. And Davos is saying, he shouldn't. He wishes his son wouldn't have followed him, because then his son would still be alive. So he's kind of blaming himself there. But again, we saw that Mathos was a bit of a fanatic. So chances are, even if Davos wasn't there, Mathis would have been there. But anyway. And Salador tells him that Stannis is still alive. He's licking his wounds at Dragonstone, and he won't talk to anybody but Melisandre. He never leaves her side, and he won't talk to anybody else, and he's basically just pouting. So, and he also lets Davos know that Stannis isn't talking to anybody but Melisandre, but Melisandre's out and about, and what she's doing is burning people alive. Nice. Yeah, she's burning people alive. And of course this triggers Davos' hate for her, and he wants to kill her. And Salador tells him, if you can't kill her. If you do succeed in killing her, Stannis will kill you anyway. If you fail at killing her, Stannis will kill you anyway. And he says, everybody's thought you were dead, so try to stay alive a little bit longer here, because you're going to get yourself killed if you go after Melisandre, because Stannis is so wrapped up in her that he's not going to let that go if Davos tries to kill her. So he's just going to get himself in trouble, because Stannis is basically under her spell completely and totally, and if Davos acts out against her, it's going to mean Davos getting himself killed. So Salador tries to warn him away that way, but yeah, we see what happens later, don't we? Anyway, then we go back to the Stark troops. Robb and Roose and the rest of them arriving at Harrenhal, where the Mountain was left in charge after Tywin left, and that's when Arya escaped. So the Mountain was left in charge of Harrenhal, and they're getting there now, but the Mountain is already gone. And so makes you wonder, who tipped off the Mountain that the Stark's troops were on their way? I wonder. Might be a little hint in this scene too. Maybe. I'm just saying, maybe. But anyway, and he gets there, and every single prisoner that was at Harrenhal, which is mostly people from the north and a couple of people from the Riverlands, they are all just left there lying around dead. They weren't even buried or nothing. They were just killed and left. Because the Mountain's a fun guy, and we don't get a fraction of the stuff in the show that he did in the book. I mean, he was like killing and raping hundreds of people on his like trek through the Riverlands, and yeah, he's not a nice guy. And like burning children alive and stuff like that. The Mountain's not a fun guy, but they show very little of that in the show, so it's nice to get this little bit where you get at least some insight into how bad the Mountain really is. He found out the Starks were coming, killed everybody, just left them there dead, and took off. So yeah. And Roose makes this comment. He's talking to Karstark, and you get the idea that he's talking about all the people left for dead. But what he says is the debt will be repaid. So he's quoting the Lannisters, basically. And it makes you wonder, why is Robb's right-hand man quoting the Lannisters? I mean, yeah, it could just be a coincidence that that's so similar to what the Lannisters are always saying. But at the same time, you're like wondering how the Mountain knew they were coming. And now Roose is here quoting the Lannisters. So it makes you wonder if maybe there's a little something going on there. But we'll see, I guess. It's not really ever completely said that that's what's going on, but you'll get some ideas as the show goes on that maybe Roose isn't all that trustworthy. I mean, look at just the whole Roose was always pushing for kill all the prisoners, don't save them, torture them and kill them. So he's not exactly a nice guy either. And then this guy's still alive, Qyburn. We don't see him much in season 3. He'll come more into play in season 4 and 5, but yeah, not a fan of him neither. So you'll probably end up disliking him as the show goes on as well. But yeah, that's Qyburn. That's our first introduction to him. He is a former maester who got kicked out of the Citadel, and that's all I'm going to say about him for now. Then we go to Tyrion's meeting with Tywin, and Tywin's ignoring Tyrion during his letter-writing frenzy. And now you couldn't really tell what the letter said much there, but I put it in because you'll see that almost every single time you see Tywin this entire season, he's writing letters. And there is a reason for that. There is a point to that, and it will be explained. But it's a nice thing to note now. Just watch. Every time they show Tywin, he's writing a letter. And it does mean something, and there's a reason for it. So we will find out later what all these letters are about, but for now, just keep it in mind. And Tyrion's making lame small talk, asking Tywin how he likes his new job, and he enjoyed it when it was his job. And Tywin's just not even giving an inch here. He's like, yeah, I heard how much you enjoyed it. I heard you had a whore in my bed, even though it wasn't really Tywin's bed at that time. And he asks Tyrion what he wants, and he said he wants to know why his beloved father didn't visit while he was injured, and then Tywin's like, oh, Pycelle told me you were fine. So he's just like blowing him off at every corner. And Tyrion then just brings up the fact that he was trying to control Cersei and Joffrey and defend the city while Tywin was off hanging out at Harrenhal. And if it wasn't for Tyrion, the city would have fallen before Tywin even got there to quote-unquote save them. And he said that he just wants Tywin to admit that Tyrion did a good job and that he had a big part in saving King's Landing. And Tywin's just like, oh, singers and jugglers need applause, not Lannisters. He's not even giving him an inch. None of the bloody gratitude that Tyrion is asking for. And Tyrion says, well, he wants Casterly Rock because it's his by right, because Cersei's the queen, so she's running all 7 kingdoms, and Jaime's a Kingsguard, so he can't inherit anything. So, kind of like the Night's Watch, when you join the Kingsguard, you give up all your titles and rights to inherit stuff. But he says that he's the rightful heir of Casterly Rock, and that's what he wants. And Tywin's like, oh, no. Not gonna happen. He tells him that he'll get accommodations better suited to him in a position that fits his talents, and if he does it well, in time he'll get given a suitable wife, and then he adds that he'd let himself be consumed by maggots before making Tyrion the heir to Casterly Rock. And he goes on to blame Tyrion again for Joanna dying, Tywin's wife Joanna, because she died giving birth to Tyrion, like it was his fault, but they all blame him for it. And says that he's an ill-made little creature full of envy, cunning, lust and low cunning, and he would never ever let Tyrion be the heir, even though he has to let him go by the name Lannister, since, and this is an interesting line, since he cannot prove that Tyrion is not his. So it makes you wonder if he's got some doubt about whether or not Tyrion is his. But anyway, so yeah, that's not going to fly with Tywin. He's not going to let Tyrion have Casterly Rock no matter what. And then we go to Sansa and Shae. Pardon me while I nap. Yes, I know, I'm not a fan of Sansa or Shae or Littlefinger. Don't really have an opinion on Roz. So yeah, everybody in this scene I just love. Okay, but anyway, so they're playing their little boat game where Sansa's making up stories about where the boat's coming from or where it's going, and she says that, oh, this boat's going to go to Dorne and it's never going to come back because the captain's sick of risking his life for the highborn lords and ladies of King's Landing to get better wine than they deserve. And Shae's like, no, it's going to Volantis. And Sansa's like, well, why do you think that? And she's like, because I've seen a boat in Volantis and it looked like that. And Sansa's like, you're not supposed to just tell the truth. You're supposed to make up a story. And Shae's like, why? I already know what the truth is. And Sansa's got an interesting line here. Says, you have to make it up instead of telling the truth, because the truth is always horrible or boring. Or boring or horrible, whatever. I forget what order she puts it in. But, interesting, because the Shae's talking about, she's telling the truth because she knows the truth, but at the same time, Shae's been lying this whole time, too, about being a handmaiden instead of why she's actually there, which is because of Tyrion. But anyway, Littlefinger sends Shae away to talk to Sansa. And he tells Sansa that he is looking into an assignment that would take him far away from the capital, and if she still wants to, he can get her out of there when he leaves. But she can't tell anyone, and she has to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. And Sansa's all for that. I will throw a party if the day ever comes when Sansa figures out that Littlefinger is the one that, held a knife to her father's throat and had the City Watch and the Lannister guards and everybody turn on him. Well, the City Watch anyway. I'll be so happy the day she ever finds out that Littlefinger was behind betraying her father, because right now she is so stupid she's trusting Littlefinger, and I really, really can't wait for her to find out that he was the one that betrayed her dad, if it ever happens. I honestly don't know if and when it ever will, but I think it'll be pretty damn funny if it ever does. But anyway, because Sansa will get a big, huge dose of reality about how stupid she is to trust him. But then again, she's her mother's daughter, and Catelyn trusted Littlefinger too, so they're both idiots, if you ask me. But anyway, so then Ros has this little conversation with Shae while Littlefinger's talking to Sansa, and Ros is trying to whore bond with Shae and saying, oh, we've both come a long way, and it's not easy for us, and Shae's pretending like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a whore, no. But Ros says, watch out for Sansa with Littlefinger. So even Ros, who works for Littlefinger, is not trusting Littlefinger. And Shae says, oh, she always watches out for Sansa. It's a little hard to hear her say that line when you see him later episodes, but I won't go there right now. So anyway, Ros doesn't even trust Littlefinger, and she's telling Shae not to trust Littlefinger and to watch out for Sansa. But anyway, another boat. Lots of boats. This is the boat that Dany left Karth on when they took Xaro's possessions and bought a ship at the end of last season. This is the boat that they left Karth on, and as you can see, her dragons have gotten a little bit bigger. So again, I say it's a little hard to tell when how much time has passed from one scene to the next. But and we see Drogon. He's a pretty good fisherman. He dives down in the water, catches a fish, throws it up in the air, and sets it on fire. And yes, that's a Drogon. I know they never ever say the names of the dragons hardly at all in the show, but Drogon's the black one. Viserion is the orangish, cream-ish colored one, and Rhaegal is the green one. But Drogon's the one that they show the most. He's the one that's black with the red in his wings. But yeah, he tosses the fish up in the air and toasts it, because as they said in a previous season, too, I believe, that dragons like cooked food. That's why they wouldn't eat it first, because the food wasn't cooked. But once they learned how to spit fire, then they could cook their food. And as you can see, Drogon is quite capable of hunting down his own food and feeding himself already, even though he's still pretty darn small. He's like maybe the size of a dog right now. So they've gotten bigger. They were like the size of cats last season. Now they're like the size of dogs. So makes you wonder how big they're going to get. But because it hasn't taken that long for them to go. I mean, they were eggs in season 1. They were the size of cats in season 2. And now they're the size of pretty big dogs in season 3. So yeah, they're growing, and that's actually part of the conversation here, where Jorah says, oh, they're growing fast, and Dany says, oh, well, not fast enough, I need an army. I can't wait till they're full grown, I need an army now. And Jorah reminds us of where they're going. He says that they'll be in Astapor by nightfall, and they're going there to see the Unsullied, which are an army of slave soldiers, and Dany's not happy about this. And she says, yeah, but they're slave soldiers. They're not just soldiers. They're slave soldiers. And what does that make me if I buy them? That makes me a slaver, and I hate slavery, and I don't want to be a slaver, and I want other people to think of me as a slaver, because if they see me with a slave army, that's what they're going to think, that I'm just another slaver. And she hates slavery so much, she never wants to be considered a slaver. And she's so against it, she is second-guessing the whole idea of getting the Unsullied, because she's so opposed to any kind of idea that propagates slavery. And by buying them, she's propagating slavery, even though it's for a good reason. But still, it's like she doesn't want to have to stoop to that. But at this point, that might be her only option. And they show that the Dothraki are not really enjoying the boat ride. And she says that, Jorah says, "Oh, another lovely day." And she says, "Don't mock them. They're the first Dothraki to cross the sea, and if they'll do it, others will." And he says, "No, they won't do that until you prove that you're strong, because Dothraki only follow strengths, and they won't follow you until you prove that you're strong. So in order to do that, you need an army." So it goes back in a full circle kind of thing. And then Davos arrives at Dragonstone, and he gets to the little room that Stannis has locked himself in with Melisandre, and Stannis is like, "Oh, I heard you were dead." He's like, completely no emotions whatsoever. Typical Stannis. His best friend was probably dead, and now he's not. And he's like, "Oh, I heard you were dead." So yeah, typical Stannis. Davos says he wants to speak to Stannis alone, because Melisandre's there, and Stannis says, "Oh, we are alone." And Davos spews more of this honorable and just BS. I'm just so sick of people saying Stannis is honorable and just. He lets Melisandre burn people alive just because they don't agree with him. That sounds a lot like the Mad King. Hello? Aerys was known for murdering people by burning them alive. Like, Ned Stark's father, for one. And now Stannis is burning people alive just for not agreeing with him. What kind of freaking king would he be? He'd have to burn every single person in the Seven Kingdoms who doesn't convert to the Lord of Light. It would basically be an Inquisition all freaking over again. So anybody that thinks Stannis would make a good king, they just kind of make me sick, because this is the kind of king Stannis would be. If you don't convert to this religion, I am going to burn you alive for not agreeing with me. And plus, it's like Stannis doesn't even believe that much in the religion, but he's still going to kill these people for not believing in it, or not saying they believe in it. It would be an Inquisition. He would have to kill every single person in Westeros. What kingdom would he have then? He would be the King of the Ashes. And yes, we're going to hear that quote later, but about somebody else. But anyway, so yeah, Stannis would make a horrible king, and I'm sick to death of people saying he's honorable and just and make a good king. It's BS. He would murder anybody that doesn't agree with him. Ugh. Okay, anyway. Sorry, Stannis rant. I'm so sick of people saying Stannis would make a good king and that he's honorable. It just it makes me ill. But anyway, so moving on. Davos brings up the burning people alive. He says that there's still a war to fight, and Stannis says he is fighting. And he says, "How? By burning people alive?" And Melisandre says, "Well, how would you punish the infidels?" And Davos has a great line here. He says, "I don't judge people by their gods, or else I would have thrown you into the sea the day you arrived on Dragonstone." Oh, I would have paid to see that. That would have been a great episode, let me tell you. I would have loved that. I mean, yes, Melisandre's probably going to have to do something important later in the series, but in the meantime, I really dislike her. But anyway, so, and then Melisandre pulls this crap where she says that she's not his enemy, and he said, "Yes, you are." And she said, "No, your enemy is who you were fighting in the Blackwater, and you guys would have won if you would have taken me with you." So she's pulling this crap where she's claiming that she had some ability to win the fight at Blackwater if she just would have been there. Well, honey, if you're so powerful, why'd you have to be there? Couldn't you have won the fight for them from Dragonstone? She still never explains exactly how she would have won this so-called fight during Blackwater, but she claims that, they would have won if she would have been there. Whatever. Narcissistic much? But anyway, and then she brings up his son again and blames him and says, "I told your son the truth. Death by fire is the purest death, and he wouldn't have died if he wouldn't have convinced Stannis to leave me behind." And that's Davos' last straw. And he lunges at her with the knife when she insinuates that it's his fault that, if he hadn't spoken against her, then Amathos would still be alive, is basically what she's saying. And so he lunges at her with the knife. And the guards grab him, and he gets thrown in a dungeon. Although, I don't know, even if they wouldn't have grabbed him, I don't know if it would have worked. Because remember, Maester Cresson, in the first episode of Season 2, tried to kill Melisandre too. And he drank the poison, and she drank the poison, and he fell over dead, and she was just fine. So, I don't know if even it would have worked then, even if he hadn't been grabbed by the guards. But yeah, he gets thrown in a dungeon, which I guess is better treatment than the other people. He hasn't been burned alive yet. But anyway, and then we move on to A Dick in a Box. Joffrey and Marjorie getting traveled through the streets of King's Landing. And they're in litters, palanquins. I've heard them called both. Basically a big cage that the guards carry to keep them safe, and not out where the people can get to them, considering that riot that happened when they didn't have those, which is mentioned in this episode as well. But then Marjorie gets out of Hearst, and it's really hard for me to talk about this scene because I already did this once anyway, and it didn't record correctly, so I have to do it again. But yes, Marjorie is doing good things. She's going to talk to these orphans and telling them how their fathers were supposedly heroes, and that the people that attacked them were bad, and it was King Joffrey who saved King's Landing, and their fathers died heroes, and that's what they need to remember, and blah blah blah. And she also even goes so far as to tell the septa, like the nun that runs the orphanage, if they need food or clothes or anything, come directly to me. Don't come to anybody else, because she knows darn well that nobody else in King's Landing would listen to that request. So it's like, yeah, she's doing all good things here. Yes, I will give her that. But at the same time, you got to keep it in the back of your head. She's not doing this just because she's a good person. It's not out of the goodness of her heart. It's not because she's so altruistic or anything like that. It comes across that way if you haven't paid attention to previous episodes, but it all goes back to that conversation after Renly died, when Littlefinger asked her if she wants to be a queen. She says, no, I want to be the queen. So everything she does, although on the surface she's doing good stuff, it's all about putting herself in a position of power, herself and her family. So it's not just because she's a nice person or a generous person. It's because she knows that she needs to get the people on the side of the king, and therefore on her side, because she's going to be the queen. Now, the way I think about it here is, if Marjorie wasn't going to be married to Joffrey, do you think, for 1 second, she would be walking around in the alleys and talking to orphans and giving them food? And even, they say later during the little dinner here, having the Tyrell family and the Reach send food to King's Landing. Do you think she would be doing any of that if it weren't for the fact that she's going to be the queen? Not a chance in hell. It's obvious that the only thing she wants is power, and she wants to be the queen. And the way she's going about it is just a completely different way than the current ruling body and the previous ruling body. The king before Dany's dad, Dany's grandfather, he was a good king. And Dany's dad started out okay and then went loopy. And then Robert, he just didn't care at all. So it's just, we've had so many bad kings, it makes her look like she's doing all this wonderful stuff, but it's all just because she wants power, and that's it, and that's all. So anyway, then we go to dinner with the Lannisters and the Tyrells. And another line I like from Cersei, even though it's not one that most people pay attention to, but she looks at Marjorie's dress and says, "Oh, you must be cold." In other words, a nice little backhanded way of saying, "Oh, you dress like a whore." But anyway, so, because I mean, seriously, noble girls don't show skin. That's just against the rules, and she kind of doesn't follow those rules. I think that's a show invention. I don't remember them saying much about Marjorie dressing like a whore in the book. Actually, Marjorie had a very, very tiny role in the book. She was basically just a background character and hardly even was in any scenes, so they've made her a much bigger part in the show, probably because it's an actress who's known for other parts, like Anne Boleyn, the part I hate her for, But anyway, so, and then Marjorie compliments the metalwork in Cersei's dress as well. And because Cersei's been wearing these dresses lately that have like armor built into them. And Cersei says, oh, well, you might find a little bit of armor useful, especially if you want to wander around Flea Bottom and if you plan to become queen. And then she goes into the story about how there was a riot the day that Myrcella left for Dorne, that riot that I said would be mentioned again, when the Septon's arm got ripped off and Sansa almost got raped and everything. And actually there was another girl who hasn't been mentioned yet, but she will be mentioned later in the show, who got very badly raped in that riot, which I guess I don't think Sansa really was in much danger in the riot in the book, so I guess maybe they're trying to merge a little bit of the Lawless Stokeworth character with Sansa just for that scene, just to show that there was a lot of danger. But they do mention Wallace and even introduce her much later, but she's a very minor character from what I've seen so far. I mean, she might get bigger, but I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, Cersei mentions the riot and Joffrey not wanting to look weak at all, especially in front of Marjorie, because that's what ruined his relationship with Sansa. Sansa realizing that he's a big coward and nothing else, but he doesn't want to look weak in front of Marjorie, so he's like, oh, my mother just is, just blowing things out of proportion, and it's because of her age she worries more, and we were never in any real danger, and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so Joffrey basically just calls Cersei an old woman with no grasp of reality right to her face, even though she's being a lot more truthful than Joffrey in this case. But then Cersei's got another backhanded insult towards Joffrey. Cersei, of all people. She says, oh, you are your father's son. We can't all have a king's bravery. Yeah, that's kind of a double dig at Joffrey in so many ways. And that's very odd for Cersei to say anything against Joffrey. And probably book people will have a fit about that, because in the book, Cersei never complained about anything Joffrey did. She just didn't care. In the show, it shows that she is a little bit more affected by Joffrey's behavior than she is in the book. And they talk about Marjorie being charitable, and Joffrey says, oh, I'm sure she knows what she's doing. And then Cersei's got that, oh, I'm sure she does know what she's doing. So they're kind of talking about two different things, but saying the same thing. So Cersei knows a manipulator when she sees one, because she is one. And then I just love that Cersei's the only one that sees through Marjorie. It's so nice. But I know, I don't like Cersei, but I don't like Marjorie either. So I find Cersei more interesting than Marjorie. Marjorie, just typical two-faced, power hungry. Cersei's got a lot more going on than just that, I think. But anyway, then Dany gets to Astapor and meets the Unsullied. And Krasnus is the name of the guy she's talking to. It's Krasnus Mo Naklas, I believe. But we'll just call him Krasnus. All the people in Essos have strange names, like Zarazo and Doxus, etc. But anyway, she also meets Missandei here. Missandei is the girl who's doing the translations. And an interesting note here is that Krasnus is speaking in Valyrian, and Missandei is translating the Valyrian into the common tongue of Westeros, which we know is English, but they never call it English because it's not England. But yeah, he's speaking Valyrian. Valyrians were the ones that were like the Roman Empire, if you want to equate it to our world, and they were like the oldest society, the most advanced society, etc., etc. And if you recall, they were also the ones that started the slavery, and they were also the ones that started out with dragons. So they started the whole dragon riding thing and slavery as well, because they were the oldest society, like our Roman Empire was. But if you recall in Season 1, when Dany's about to walk into the pyre, she refers to herself as Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen of the blood of old Valyria, because the Targaryen family was from Valyria originally before they came to Westeros. So that was that of blood of old Valyria thing. So he's speaking Valyrian. and that is her family's homeland. But anyway, so he's saying all this stuff. He's calling her a whore and a bitch and everything else, and talking about their training and how they're trained so hard that most of them die before they ever become soldiers, and that they've driven all the weakness and fear of death out of them, and he proves this by cutting off the guy's nipple. And the guy's only response is, "This one is pleased to have served you." So he does that to prove to Danny that they have no weakness, no fear of death, no nothing. And then he goes on to tell them that in order to complete their training, they're given 1 silver and told to go kill a newborn baby in front of its mother to prove that they have no weakness left in them, and then pay the 1 silver. And Danny's like, what, excuse you, what? You have them kill babies and pay the mother 1 silver? An apology for killing her child? And guy's like, oh, she's a soft mewling fool. She doesn't know what she's talking about. We don't give a silver to the mother. We give a silver to the baby's owner. So, yeah. He's just a real scumbag. And that's the way slavery is done there. And that's the training they go through. And it's not even like the mother gets a silver out of it. And the silver is not much, okay? Not much at all. And, yeah, that's how they finish their training. So Danny is appalled, offended, not thrilled with this at all. She's trying to hide it, but not doing a very good job because she finds it so distasteful. Not just slavery, but killing little babies, because, I mean, these are really, really sore spots for Danny. I mean, she was a slave and she lost her baby. Those are 2 big, big sore spots for Danny, and she is not happy with the way these soldiers are made at all. And she tries to cover it up and tries to keep her composure and says, okay, how many do you have? And he says 8,000. And she's just trying to hide her disgust, but not doing a very good job at it. And even says that to Jorah. She's like, well, 8,000 dead babies. That's so. Yeah. I have to stop the recording at an hour because it only records sound for an hour, and I have to stop it and play it back to the point where I stop talking, and then start recording again for anything after the hour mark. I stopped it a little early this time, and when I was listening to it back, it was really staticky. So I don't know. I haven't changed any settings or any equipment or anything, so I don't know why it's doing that. So I may have to record this whole thing again. But anyway, like I said, I haven't changed anything, so I don't know why it would be staticky all of a sudden. But I'm going to try to finish this up. And I might have to just re-record the whole thing. I don't know. But anyway, so Danny has just heard about their training, and she's not very happy. And she's asking, Jorah, so 8,000 dead babies, huh? And so she's still not thrilled about this whole idea of getting the slaves. And Jorah says, well, obviously, do you think they're going to have a better life if you leave them with the slave masters, or do you think they're going to have a better life if you buy them? Because you're not going to ask them to do the things these slave masters have asked them to do. So whether or not you're opposed to the idea of slavery, you're still going to be a better option for these men than leaving them here. And then she gets distracted by this little girl who tosses her this little ball thing. And she, mimes for her to open it. And when Danny opens the little ball thing this little girl gave her, there's a surprise inside. A creepy, crawly little surprise. And it is, they don't say what it is in the show, but it is a manticore. It's kind of like a scorpion, but worse and bigger and more deadly, if you can believe that. And just as the thing crawls out of the ball and is about to jump in Danny's face, this cloaked figure that we've been seeing shots of following Danny, ominously, he's been following Danny this whole time. But just as the manticore pops out of the little ball that the little girl gave her and runs at Danny, this cloaked figure that has been following her jumps in and shoves a dagger through the manticore and saves Danny at the last minute. And that's not really a very Game of Thrones-y thing to do. Most of the time, people don't get saved at the last minute. So when it happens, it's rare. And I think it was pretty close to this in the book. I don't remember exactly, but I think think it was pretty close. But it's really rare for people to get saved at the last minute in Game of Thrones. Usually if they're about to die, they're going to die, and nobody's going to save them at the last minute. So it's really rare. But anyway, this cloaked figure has stabbed this manticore and saved Dany. And then we see the girl again, and she's got the blue lips like the warlocks now. She didn't have them before, but she does now. So Dany assumes that it was somebody sent after her by the warlocks because they're not happy with her for having her dragons toast Pyat Bree and then leaving with her dragons, which they wanted to keep. So the warlocks are still out to get her. So Dany's been making enemies along the way. And already also the Dothraki that left her, that was insinuated clean back in season 1 that the Dothraki would kill her and her people because they don't want a woman running things. And then now the warlocks are pissed off at her too. So she's made a few enemies along the way, and that's one of the results of that. And the guy in the cloak goes after the little girl, but she magically disappears and then reappears somewhere off behind them, so he didn't get a chance to kill her. And so obviously there's some magic-y stuff going on there, and it's really hard for me to even talk about it because if this whole thing's going to be staticky, I'm going to have to probably re-record it anyway. And then we get another blank screen for no reason. I don't know. But then he takes off his hood, and we see that it's Barristan Selmy. Now, in the book, he was disguised for a long, long time, and Dany didn't know who he was. But they couldn't really do that in the show because it's the same actor. And obviously somebody would say, is that the same actor? Is he playing a different role? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. So they kind of scrapped that, and he just introduced himself. And he calls Dany my queen. And Dany's like, what? This guy speaks my language, and he's calling me queen? She asks her, do you know this guy? And he says, yes, he's one of the greatest fighters in the Seven Kingdoms. And the Lord Commander of Robert Baratheon's Kingsguard. So he's like, yeah, he's a great fighter. And yeah, he called you queen, but he didn't want a Robert's men. So he has to point that out as well. He's like, okay, wait a second, this guy's supposed to be on Robert's side. Why is he here calling Dany queen? But Barristan says that Robert is dead, and that he's been searching for Daenerys to ask her forgiveness, is what he says. And he wants her to forgive him for not being able to save her family. Because if you recall, Barristan, before he was with Robert, he was in Dany's father's Kingsguard as well. So before he ever served Robert, he served the Targaryens and Dany's father. And then Robert pardoned him and let him be in the Kingsguard again. But he originally was a Targaryen Kingsguard for her father. So he says that he's been searching for the true queen, and he wants to be part of her Queensguard. So, one of the greatest fighters in the Seven Kingdoms used to be loyal to the Targaryens, and now he's looking for Dany and wants to serve her instead. So, it was a really good idea for them to get rid of him, huh? Now that he's with their enemy, so to speak, and probably the most threatening enemy, because, yeah, Stannis is after them too, but Stannis ain't got no dragons. So, yeah, that's how season 3 begins. And like I said, the whole beginning of this recording was really staticky. I don't know if it's still staticky. I haven't listened back to the second part yet. I might have to do the whole thing again. I don't want to because my throat is killing me. But if it's unlistenable, I might have to. So I'm going to see if I can fix it and make it listenable or not. I honestly don't know because it's never done that before and I haven't changed anything, so I don't know why I would be doing it now. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say for now because I'm eager to see if I have to do this whole recording again because I'm amazed I even got through it this time because I don't really have a lot of time. And plus, the longer I talk, the worse my throat gets. So if I have to do a whole hour-long recording again when I already did it once, oh, that'll be fun. But anyway, so that's the end of episode 301. Valar Dohaeris. I don't believe I said that at the beginning, but it's Valar Dohaeris, which is actually the response people in Bravos say when you say Valar Morghulis. It's like a hello and hello back kind of thing. So, you say Valar Morghulis and they say Valar Dohaeris, and that's the name of the episode. So, and the last episode of season 2 was Valar Morghulis, so it's kind of a continuation of that. And Valar Dohaeris, well, I said in the last one, Valar Morghulis means all men must die. Valar Dohaeris means all men must serve. So that was the name of this episode. But like I said, I'm going to let it go here because I honestly don't know if I'm going to have to try to record this whole thing all over again, and I won't be happy because my throat is killing me and I don't know why it's all staticky anyway. It's a little weird. But I'm going to go for now, and hopefully this one will get out sometime soon and I won't have to re-record it, but I don't know. I probably will. So anyway, see you next time.